Hi, this is Bill Boggs. Welcome to Midday. I want you to take a close look at these women because on today's show we're going to be talking about their relationship. Take a close look. What do you think they have in common? Well, I'll tell you what they have in common. These women are all sisters. Now, can you guess who goes with whom? All right, show us. Go ahead. Now we'll take a close look. Aw, come on, let's get it right, girls. Who goes with whom? Now, get to your sister. All right, now let's take a close look at the sisters as you see them together. And I'll tell you this, in today's program, we're going to be talking about the complex bond between sisters, the competitiveness, why some sisters are closer than others, how sisters' relationships affect their relationships with others, and lots more. Also on today's program, we have Letty Cottin Pogrebin talking about family politics. But first, stay with us and meet the author of Sisters. By Dr. Dale V. Atkins, who is the author of this book, Sisters, a practical, helpful exploration of the intimate and complex bond between female siblings.
Mouthful.
That's what sisters are all about, huh?
It really
How do you
is.
get along with your sister, Doc?
I get along very well with her.
Really?
And talk about inspiring. She was a major inspiration for the book.
Why did you choose to write a book on sisters? Did you find there wasn't really a lot of literature, modern literature available on the subject?
You know, there's so much literature about the fantasy bond, this wonderful, wonderful connection that so many women I've met say, how come I don't have a better relationship with her? There isn't anything around that can teach me how to get closer to her, or talk about what the variables are that influence the relationship itself. So I thought it would be necessary to write a book that would have to do with a helpful guide for how people can understand a little bit more about their relationship. And that's why I did it.
How does the actual family structure affect the way that sisters end up, the kind of relationship that sisters have?
Well, the structure has a lot to do with it, where they are, what the birth order is, whether there are boys in between the sisters in the lineup, whether the parents got along when the sisters were young and whether they continue to get along, what the economic situation was. There were so many variables, but the structure, whether the parents are single parents or divorced, or whether there are stepsisters, half-sisters, there's so many variables that it all affects how these girls get along as children and what their relationship will be like into adulthood.
I know. I read about, reading your book and reading material about it, about two older sisters, but every time they go back home, they're like, what, teenagers
yes,
again. And they really pick up that same relationship.
They fall right back into patterns that they might have had when they were youngsters. And one of the things that I see with sisters is that even though they may be very accomplished in their own worlds, in their own right, when they go back, if they haven't been able to become really true individuals in their own right and develop a relationship with their sisters outside of their family, they can fall right back into it. Sometimes parents perpetuate it, sometimes just being in the same four walls that they grew up in makes them feel like, okay, this is who I was when I was a little girl, this is who I still am in this household. And it's not like who they are outside.
What is a sister by choice? What do you mean by that term?
A sister by choice is a person, a woman with whom another woman feels very, very close, almost like a sister. And I find that women who have biological sisters or women who don't have biological sisters can form very, very close bonds, friendship bonds, which they consider like sisters.
How does competition affect the long-range relationship between sisters or among sisters?
It can be good and bad. It can, we have the McGee sisters, for instance, the basketball players from USC, who compete with each other daily and who have a very loving relationship outside of the basketball court.
One made the Olympic team and the other didn't, correct?
Yeah, and they've talked about that. I think that competition can be healthy, it can be kind of sparring, it can also be very difficult. If the competition, is for the parental love and the parental favor, in childhood, that kind of competition can follow one through into adulthood. So sometimes we see women competing in their adult arenas about issues that just weren't resolved when they were younger, and that's very difficult.
What should a parent know, what should parents know if they have two daughters who are born very close together? What are the potential problems in that formulation?
One of the major potential problems is, and we see it very much with twins, is to be able to develop individual identities so that these young girls do know who they are as separate from their sisters, that they don't get issues of their own histories confused. Sometimes with twins we find that women don't remember what happened to them. Did it happen to me or did it happen to my sister?
Really?
Yes.
How do sisters in their relationships with each other go on to affect their relationships with men?
That also depends on the relationship
Yeah.
that they have together, whether or not they're willing to have another person in their lives. In the women I've interviewed through the seminars I've offered, there have been many people who, and I've talked about them in the book, who've talked about men coming into their relationship very, very unwillingly. They haven't wanted them to get into the secrets that they have shared with their sisters.
I know, I read that, and it seemed that was one of the things that seemed difficult for me to understand, because it seems that a space that sisters occupy in each other's lives would be totally different than a space that they would be occupying with a man.
Yes,
a
indeed.
husband or whatever.
Indeed, I believe it should be. And what happens is that so often when there are very, very close sisters who have shared so much of themselves, they think that, well, I should be able to tell these kinds of things to this other person in my life. And indeed, they probably don't even need to be.
Or they don't need to?
They may not need to be in that realm, in their love life, or they just may not be appropriate in that area.
What happens at a sister seminar?
Lots of women.
You conduct sister seminars.
Yes, all over the country. And these are for women who have sisters or who have lost their sisters. Women may come together with their sisters or without them.
What's the object?
The object is to understand why we are in the situation we're in as adults. They're for adult women. Why we feel the way we do about our sisters and what we can do to enhance the relationship we have. Some women come with very close feelings towards their sisters, and they really celebrate the joys that they have together. Other women come without their sisters because they may be estranged from them.
And they're still trying to get over the unresolved stuff from their childhood with their sisters.
A lot of women do come.
It's never worked out in some cases.
In some cases it's not, and we may have sisters who are estranged for 20, 30 years who will come to a sister seminar still with this person in her heart. She may be alive, she may be dead. So I have found over the years that women who come to the seminars bring with them this person who's very close to her.
You've been hearing conversation with Dr. Dale V. Atkins, who is the author of this book, which is called Sisters. Now, we have 7 women seated on our main platform here, including your sister. It's a big crowd. I'm going to be down in another chair. Could we have like a miniature sister seminar? Could we get into some of the questions that you ask?
Sure.
In the next segment?
I would love to.
I think it'd be interesting, okay?
Okay.
So why don't you I'll take your mic off. Why don't you go over there and join your sister, and we'll be back and continue our special midday program devoted to the love and some of the not so much love among sisters. We'll be right back. I can't believe that we're playing the Stanley Siegel theme song on this program. Anyway, welcome back. We're live on midday, and I hope if maybe you'd like to participate in this program with your sister, give your sister a call right now, because I think you're going to enjoy this. As you can see, seated behind me, we have 4 sets of sisters. Let me introduce them to you. Let's go back to Dr. Dale Atkins. Hi, Dale. Nice to see you. Dale, introduce your sister, please.
This is my sister, Daryl Roth.
Hi, Daryl. Daryl, what do you do?
Well, I'm a mother of 2 lovely children. I'm married, and I also have an interior design firm in New Jersey.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, this is Liz Lemon.
Yes. Hi,
Hi,
I'm
Liz.
model, and my sister and I have just started our own company. It's called Clear to the Ear, and it's
Clear to the Ear?
That's it.
And your sister's name is Bri Lemon. What's the company like? What's it about?
It's earrings.
It's
Custom
earrings.
jewelry, yeah.
Do you want to show us your little earring that you've got on your left ear today?
Wow.
This is for Canal Jean Company.
Okay, good. Now we have 2 other sisters here. This is Thurl and Martin. Thurl, it's nice to meet you. Thurl, introduce your other sister. Your sister.
This is my sister, Stacia Henderson.
But you're not the only 2 sisters in the family, correct?
Now we have 2 more.
2 more sisters.
Yes.
Well, we can only get so many people on the platform today. And here's Kate McGrath. Kate McGrath is the owner of KM Productions, a production company specializing in fashion, beauty, and entertainment, right?
Right.
Right?
This is my sister Charlotte.
Charlotte, nice to have you with us, Charlotte. You work with your sister Kate, and according to my information, you're the baby in the family,
The girl.
the younger sister,
Younger sister,
and the
right.
friend to Kate.
Maybe not anymore if you gave them that information.
Well, we had to get it from someplace. Okay, what are some of the what's a way you would kick off a meeting with sisters like
Okay,
this?
what I would have done beforehand if we were in a real seminar is that I would have talked about some of the variables that affect the sisters' relationship, give a little history, so people can kind of have an idea of what's going on. And then I would do as you just did, introduce the panel,
Right.
and ask specific questions about some of these variables. I just heard a few things like the labels, the kid sister, the young sister. I noticed that two of the women are dressing alike. It seems as if there's always a sister seminar where two women come dressed alike. Now, did you know that?
No.
See?
They answered alike, too.
And I would talk about sometimes what we think about when our sisters aren't with us. We know they're thinking about them. There's kind of this almost like a telepathic Thank you. Telepathic connection. And with the twins, I would want to know how they were able to maintain their individual identity. Twins have sometimes a difficult time with that, why there wasn't competition between them.
Oh, let's find out about that.
Well, because I think we weren't really treated like twins. We were just treated as two people that happened to be the same age and came around the same time. And we were just treated like two sisters and not. My parents just were very, you do your thing. She was into ballet, I was into singing, and we each had something that we did really well. And we kind of rooted each other on. Like when she would dance, I was really happy for her, and I would kind of stay out of that.
Well,
I would let her
that
do her
sounds
own
very
thing.
healthy. I mean, it sounds
Yeah,
as
it
if
really worked out really
your
well.
parents must. What would you suppose? There's a young family watching now, a young mother and father watching now, and they have twins, and their twins
Right.
are just 9 or 10 months old, little baby twins.
Right.
What would one guideline be that you could offer them?
Okay, I'd say a parent would look at two people and say, well, this one seems to be, good at, let's say, dance. Like she was really a great dancer. And just push them that way. And I was always into singing. I was a tomboy, and I just did my thing. So they kind of just took those two things and let us, not take the one thing and both do it. I didn't dance with her. She went to her classes, and I went to my classes separately. I was like, a jock. I was into tennis, and I did my tennis, and she didn't. So we kind of didn't ever have to compete because we were always doing different things.
Was that an important thing for your own survival? I think it
Yeah,
seems
I think it was.
you didn't really want to compete. You had your area.
No, we were happy. Like I knew that she was a great dancer, and when she dances, I leave her alone, and I sit back and I watch, and I say,
She cheers.
I cheer her on. I say, God, that's great. You're a great dancer, and I don't feel like I have to get up and do it. I don't even want to. I let her take the stage. I know that's what she does best.
Well, you're doing all the talking.
She's the aggressive one. I'm the aggressive one.
All right, labels. Let's take them out a minute, because sometimes labels can be good for people if they're positive, and sometimes they can be very limiting and negative. Right? Help us get some of the labels. out
Okay,
there.
one of the things that I wanted to point out that was just mentioned is this was done, the separation was done, it seems to me, in a very healthy, positive way. Not that she's doing this and you can't do it. And that's the encouragement that I think parents need to be able to give their children. You said she's the aggressive one. I always ask women to, ask if their perceptions of themselves are similar to
Match
their
them,
sisters' perceptions.
Well,
And
let's run that by.
what would you call yourself? What's the label you were given, Kate?
Well, I'm the first of 6 children, so I was somewhat of the surrogate mother, being the first. And when I would babysit and take care of my 3 younger brothers and my 2 younger sisters, I was always saying, no, you can't do this, you can do this, and you should wear that dress. I didn't do anything with my brothers. I couldn't tell them what to wear. But and they all were taller than me then. But I was sort of thinking my way was the best. I went so far as to give my sister a permanent. I wanted to see how it would look, but I tested her out.
I wore a hat
I
for a
lightened
week.
her hair. I think that the perception has changed immensely for the best, but she was my younger sister and my little baby sister. So that was it.
But just stop and think for a second. All of the input you get all your life as the older one, the one who's a surrogate mother, and the one who's labeled as the baby. How just sitting here now, I'm not trying to stir up trouble, but it must affect the whole environment in which you grow up. If you're constantly labeled the baby, and you got somebody else who's older labeled the mother, tell us what you're thinking about.
Well, as a result of that, I spent a lot of time with my brothers rather than my sisters in growing up. I was a tomboy, and so they were better to play with. And they had the equipment. They had the mitt. She didn't have a mitt. She had curlers. So in growing up, I really didn't feel like I knew my sisters that well. growing up. And it's very nice now. I think I've rediscovered them within the past
I guess that's
about 5
something
years.
that comes out.
That happens a lot with the seminars, and I think especially with the two of you, you're working together now, and you have to now get to know each other as individuals and as competent women in their own rights without those labels of being the kid or being the mother, because that won't work in a work relationship, in most work relationships where you really are developing equality. I would ask...
No, you go ahead, go ahead.
I was just going to ask you what the labels were that each of you had, either by your parents giving them to you or what you took on as your own labels.
You first, you're the oldest.
She just said you first, you're the oldest.
Well, I feel sort of like a mother also. I'm the oldest of 7, although Sassy and I are close in age, very close. So I think we were sort of competitive in being mommy to the younger ones.
What was your label? What did you think you were? Some labels are the pretty one, the smart one, the jock,
The studious one.
The studious one,
The
the
outgoing, the
creative.
self-centered one.
Precisely.
Yeah.
She is the oldest. She was always the boss. Still is. She's still the boss.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I looked up to her. You know, like she was. She was like, she's my best friend. You know, we've done everything together. We lived together for up until like 3 years ago. You know, all our lives.
Yes. This living together, sometimes when women live together, they share their own rooms. And Margaret Mead talks about how common it is for older women, after they've lost their spouses, to choose to live with one another because they're used to the patterns of their life together and they can trust each other. They may go through waves of not wanting to be together throughout their lives. They may not talk to each other for years, but they may end up wanting to live together. What was your label?
I think I was the creative one in the family. And I think that was the direction that I was almost put into, but I followed it, I loved it, and in fact to this day I'm doing things that are creative and I feel as though that's my strong suit. Contrarily, I feel that I'm not very good in areas that maybe I could have been, but was not encouraged either because that was your area and we didn't want to step over our bounds. I think we wanted to, as you point out, give each person their own avenue, and I didn't want to get in the wrong place. In that sense. So I think I was the creative one.
What about one of the questions that I asked when we were talking at the very beginning of the show, and that is how do men, how do husbands and lovers affect the relationships of, between you, between the women we have gathered here today?
One of you was recently married, or you were lived together for until 3 years ago when one of you was married, right?
Yeah, me.
What was the effect on that person coming into your very close relationship? We may not want to talk about it.
No, it's so funny because she went with my husband's brother for like a long time.
Oh, that's interesting.
2 brothers and 2 sisters.
Yes.
It was
Wow. Like, potential fireworks there, huh?
no secrets, you know, whatsoever.
Is this an issue for you?
Not at all.
With men in your lives?
Not at all. We have totally different tastes. Yeah, but there was a time when when she had a boyfriend that I didn't get along with. And there was a lot. We were a lot alike. Her boyfriend, his personality really was a lot like mine, and we clashed totally. So it was kind of like, you know, it was me or him. Yeah. And for a time, he got her, and now I have her. So
We have someone's sister on the line, I would imagine. Let me see if I can take a call here. This is Bill Boggs on Midday. Hello, welcome to our program.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Francine, and I'm from Queens. And I have a sister 5 years younger than me.
Yes.
And we're originally from Chicago. And I, for some reason, was elected the older sister and more or less the mother. And seemed to, I had to babysit. And when I went with my friends, I had to take the little sister along, resentfully. And when I babysat, I was resentful a lot of times because I wanted to be with my friends. And now we're grown. We have grown children. And she seems to be remembering a lot of the things that happened when we were very young. And she's very angry at me.
You mean the resentment?
Definitely. I don't resent her. I'm not angry with her.
But she resents the fact that you did resent her.
Well, I did at the time. because, you know, it seemed to interfere with my social life and the things I wanted to do.
Well, that's, you know, maybe at the beginning of the show when I was talking to Dr. Atkins, you heard the one thing that I offer there, and that is that sometimes going through life, not just sisters, but anybody, has a problem of unresolved problems from the past.
Well, that's exactly what it is. And then our father died when she was very young, and I moved to New York and got married, and my mother and sister, I was very lonesome, and I missed them very much, because I left everybody back in Chicago.
Now, let's just pretend for a second that you were here with us, and that question came at a sister seminar. What would you say, Dr. Atkins?
Immediately, I'm thinking of a few responses. One has to do with the fact that sometimes younger sisters remember differently than older sisters. Each of us has our own memory set, and each of us experienced these things differently. So we all remember them, the same exact situation, totally differently. Also, the parents are different. They may have been the same people, but they went through different stages of their lives.
Yeah.
So her relationship with your father was quite different from
Well,
your
what
relationship.
should she do? I guess, not that we can dispense fix yourself up therapy here, but what would a step be in the right direction?
I think one of the first steps that one needs to take is to appreciate that what she is experiencing, what her sister is experiencing and feeling and remembering is quite real. Even though it's not the woman who's calling's memory and experience, it's different, but it's real. And although she, as a teenager, perhaps resented her younger sister taking her along all of this time, now she has to give her younger sister the chance to at least validate what she's experiencing and say, you know, I guess that really was difficult for you. And try not to negate what her younger sister is telling her. If her younger sister is wanting her to pay for this now,
Right.
that's an issue that, you know, ask her what would be enough.
What
could I do now?
To get it over with.
Yeah,
right?
and
All
get it out
That's
there.
a good question to ask. Someone else is calling, so let me go back to the phone. This is Bill Boggs, and we're on Midday Live right now. Hello?
Hi, my name is John from Astoria, Queens.
John, you do not sound like someone's sister. Go ahead. What's your question,
Well,
John?
I have 4 teenage daughters.
Okay, go ahead.
And the first and the third are very similar in personality and characteristics and just the way they look even. And the second and the fourth are very similar. And they hang out together, the first and the third, and the second and the fourth. Is that the exception or the rule?
For me?
Yeah, for all sisters. Would that be like that for all sisters?
Before we attempt that answer, I just want is there anything about this that concerns you? Are you worried about this at all?
No, not at all. They're very
Okay.
happy, and they're great kids, and you know, I couldn't ask for better daughters.
That's nice.
But I just wondered why they were like that. Like the first and the third actually look alike and very similar in their ways and their likes and dislikes. And the same with the second and the fourth.
Wow.
All very good.
That's
very happy.
It's a happy question, yeah.
It is such a nice question. It's also lovely that a father would be calling about the relationship of his daughters. It's a very important connection, the parent-child.
My life is filled with women. I even have a granddaughter. My oldest daughter is married and has a daughter. And I come from a family of 5 boys.
Right. You know, I just think everybody, I guess it sounds like nature's way. It's really like a genetic question, really, that 1 and 3 go together and 2 and 4 go
There's
together.
often pairings.
I want to ask the man on the line a question. It was something that I had down that I wanted to bring up, whether or not this has affected the women with us. And that is favoritism, a sense of, are you still on the line, sir?
Yeah, sure.
Good. A sense of maybe number 3 thinks that mommy and daddy like number 2 better than they do.
There's always been a competition for first place, and daddy's love, I guess. And number 1, I guess the first was always the favorite, even for grandma, you know. But the love was always there for all of them. But they always strive to please. You know, they're really... I have really, really good kids, and I don't know.
Okay, I just wanted to ask you that question. I appreciate your call.
Okay.
We're going to take another call in a moment, but what were you thinking when we were talking about this? I just had a feeling that part of this was hitting home with you.
Well, I felt I was certainly favored, and then the other sister came along, and then the brother came along, and I had, I think, as much or even more difficulty dealing with the first-born male. Because
Really?
that
Why?
was a
That was your role?
Well, I couldn't compete with a boy. I learned how to compete with another sister, but then a brother comes along who wasn't well when he was born, so he had to be taken extra special care of. And grandmother was there with mother and father, and I didn't know till years later. I was furious, but then there's been times later on where I think that my sister has favoritism. My father's probably listening right now, but that they have a relationship where their communication is wonderful, and I'm learning how to communicate better with him by watching their communication. But there was one more thing that I feel that's helped me a lot in renewing my relationship with my sisters, is the fact that an aunt of mine died a couple of years ago, and with her death I saw my other two aunts talk about their relationship, and I became aware of how important it is to, every day, learn how to relate to your sister and show her that you love her.
Good. We have someone else on the line with a call right now, so let me go to the phone. Hi, this is Bill Boggs on Midday. Hello.
Hi, my name is Joan, and I recently, this past summer, had a very big argument with my sister on vacation, and we only started speaking again in September, and the feeling just, I really would like to be as close to her as I was before, but it just doesn't seem the same anymore.
What was the argument about?
Oh, children, a lot of things. I think we spend too much time together. Our children are near the same ages, and we're always together. Whatever we do, we go on vacation together, and just recently then we started...
Well, you're not... You're not that together anymore, right?
No, not anymore. We're trying to separate. We live too close to one another, but I still love her. But we just don't have that same feeling anymore. I feel anyway. We can't be as close as we were, where we used to call each other constantly.
Right.
Now it's more, we don't bother to call one another. We don't go out socially.
Okay. What are your ages?
We're 2 years apart, 37 and 35.
Okay. Kate, any thought here as to what might help a smooth transition into a more harmonious way?
Yeah, I think that the smooth transition needs time. And this woman on the phone sounds very eager to restore the relationship she had. And it probably won't be the relationship she had, because there's now been a new situation that needs to be dealt with. So to try and expect it to be the way it was is really denying what's actually happened. But to go through it and to go forward with it, and if her sister isn't ready now's not the time. But to keep letting her know that she is available, that she's eager, and she's ready whenever her sister is. And to give her sister the time that it will take her. We each have different time frames and different styles.
Right.
And what my style is, when I'm ready, doesn't mean that Daryl will be ready. When she's ready, it doesn't mean that I am. And that's also part of respecting the other person as she is. She's different than the caller.
All right, good.
We have this resentment, maybe, towards one another.
A deep resentment.
Well, I'm still angry with her, and I know she's angry with me. The relationship is just not the same as it used to be.
It won't be.
Well, I don't know what else. Actually, if there's any specific thing we can do. The temptation is always make some statement that somehow makes it right. And I don't think we can do that now. But let me tell you what we are going to do. Coming up in the next segment, we have Letty Cottin Pogrebin, who is the author of a book called Family Politics. We will talk to her about her book as well as her reaction to what we've been talking about. Our entire sisterhood will stay in place, and we'll meet them a little bit later in the program. So stay with us. All right, welcome back to our program. A special guest with us right now. I always enjoy having her on the program. I've known her for a long time, and I've watched her grow as a person, as an author, and as a force, social force. Her book is Family Politics, and I'm talking about Letty Cottin Pogrebin, who is also an editor of Ms. Magazine, writer for Ms. She lectures nationally on non-sexist child rearing, education, family life, and changing roles. It's good to have you with us.
It's good to be back.
What were you thinking about when you were sitting over there watching our sisters talk about their lives together?
I was thinking about three things. First is that there are family roles, but they're very much complicated by sex roles, and I think we heard many examples of that, which I'd like to explore a little.
As soon as the mother comes along, everything shifts.
Oh, lots of that. Yeah. Secondly, that everybody's hooked on hierarchy. Everybody has to organize themselves along a sort of an order. You know, the one who's interested in tennis can't be interested in ballet, or isn't, or feels somehow or other that's not her sphere. The older one has to be the mother, because mother is what the older, supposedly more judgmental and able member of the family is or does. We are hooked on roles. Somehow or other, families have to prescribe for themselves a freedom from roles in order to allow personality to develop. And the third thing that I thought about a lot is the fact that as a sister myself, I had none of those experiences for very peculiar reasons. But as a mother, I have watched a lot of them because I have 19-year-old twin daughters. So I'm interested in absolutely everything that everybody said.
Yeah.
Put it that way.
Well, let me start, go in the middle there. The question of roles and where you come into a family, whether or not you have two older brothers and you're the only girl. All this really affects your personality for your entire life. And you have to really say that. That's the truth, don't you?
Yes, I think so. I think that when we analyze what goes on in families, that's one thing. But when we talk about what might be optimum, which is what I talk about in family politics, that's something else. Wouldn't it be nice if a little girl didn't lose her place, her setting in the family sphere just because a boy got born? And look at the very fascinating patterns when, for example, a family is an only child family. What happens to that only child? He or she doesn't have to have a place in a hierarchy. It's the child. Therefore, that child can be the repository of the parents' dreams on every level. Going to be the athlete, going to be the scholar, going to be the artistic one, because it doesn't get apportioned. It doesn't get handed out to each child a little segment of humanity, of human strength. So in a way, that's why the only child is so favored. Then if you look at a family of all girls, they very often spawn the leaders because they've never had to compete with or be overshadowed by the presence of a boy in the family. You can also find in all-girl families closer relationships with the father because he hasn't sort of siphoned off his energies to be a father to a boy. You remember that song from Carousel? You can have fun with a son, but you gotta be a father to a girl.
How much do you think the roles and the way that we are still, although we may be trying to break out of some of these patterns, but still basically dealing with these roles of birth and sex and so forth, are really coming from a time when our society was totally different, when that firstborn was going to take care of the kids because the mother was out in the fields, or when a father really wanted to have a lot of sons because he wanted to make sure that he could take care of all the work that was to be done.
Well, I would love to say that we're out of that mode, but unfortunately the data doesn't show that. There still seems to be a great kind of private secret mourning when a family that has two girls and the third pregnancy turns out to be another girl. Mothers cry in the delivery rooms. Fathers get angry still. There is a disappointment still.
But isn't it the same thing, though, if you've got two boys and the third boy comes along
It may be the same thing.
It would be for me. I would want to have, if I was going to have a few children, have a little of each.
It seems that way. It does look as though it's kind of equal employment parent or equal opportunity parenthood. But it isn't that way because they're wanted for different reasons. And if you look at the statistics, people who have two boys are less likely to try for a third, that is, to try for a girl, than people who have two girls who wanted to have, let's assume everyone says, I'm only going to have two kids. The ones who have two girls are the ones who change their mind more often because the boy has a kind of preferential place in society.
Well, underlying that is the economic value that it is attached,
well,
that has been attached.
That I would say, I would agree with you, is no longer the case. I also think that we have to look at what has been said here as a kind of paradigm for female friendships throughout a lifetime, and also for a sense that the daughters or the sisters bring into the world of whether to be female means to be with a sister victim or to be with a sister strong woman. If you have had a sisterhood in your household where you can count on your sister, where you're not competitive on those cultural levels that are so debilitating, like who's the prettier one and who's the more charming one, who does daddy like more, who can please daddy more, if you've learned that from being a sister, you'll never get out of that more or less victim role, the role of the woman who wants to get male approval. But if you have been the kind of the strong sisters, watch out for them, they're powerhouses, and they're looked at as people who are going to grow up and do everything and be anything, then that affects the attitude you have about being a woman and about affiliating with other women.
Of course, a lot of the environment that helps set the stage for this kind of healthy growth and development, which you're talking about here, I think very succinctly, comes from the parents. And I guess I always end up asking you the same question at one point or another. How can young parents, people who are now on the verge of having children or have a few young children, really know how to do this, because in many cases 90% of their own parents really didn't know how to do it and structured their lives in the so-called old-fashioned way.
I think in terms of family politics, that is power relations, it only comes from communication. If the woman feels powerless in the family, if, for example, she's staying home either now or for many, many years to come, she wants to stay home as the caretaker and caregiver, and the man of the house doesn't really respect that role, then all who are like sex, that is her daughters as opposed to her sons, are going to get the sense that father doesn't like mom, doesn't think as much of mom as he thinks of a man in the world. So that first it originates with the parents' attitude toward one another. The sisters are going to feel about being female and about each other what the father feels about the mother, because he is the first translator of the world's values in the household. If he's the one who goes out and comes in and goes out and comes in, his judgment carries a tremendous amount of weight. If he, in some sense, denigrates the mother or doesn't give her equal power in the home, no matter what she does daily, then those girls are going to feel, well, I'm like her, so I mustn't be much either. So a lot resides with his attitude. Then, of course, a lot resides with her response to the mother's response to her husband. Does she allow him to exercise excessive power in family decision making, regardless of whether she brings in the money? How does she protect the children in a case of an abusive father? That sort of thing. We have only talked today about rather idyllic households. There are patterns in abusive households that have to do with being sisters and a weak mother, a mother who's perceived to be weak, or a mother who's been rendered powerless.
Again, I still come back to this question of how does one prepare oneself for this, probably the most important thing that you're going to be doing in your life.
You're going to hate the answer, but it probably should start on the first date when...
that's a good answer.
I mean
it.
I
like that answer.
When a man and a woman are sitting around and getting to know each other and establishing a kind of exchange of values, you know, what do you care about? What kind of person are you? You can really get into the notion through that kind of you know, a little nostalgia trip. Let me tell you about my family. This is what it was like for me growing up. You get a sense of whether a man was close to his sisters, whether he looked at them as kind of, you know, like 7 brides for 7 brothers, these flouncy people up in the attic.
And also projections into the future, the kind of values, not just that the parents had, but I think it is possible early in a relationship to know whether or not you are philosophically compatible with a person, or maybe you're attracted to them for one reason, but in the long run you're not going to really work as a team.
But even more specifically to say, do we share the same ideals for raising children, or do you have a feeling that we have to send down to central casting and get a girl for you and a boy for me? Are we prepared to allow our children to develop according to their own individual needs and styles? Or are we coming to this parenthood with a set of expectations, and we sure as heck want to have the sisters come through the way we think sisters should and the brothers the way we think brothers should?
Fascinating, really. I enjoy talking about this very much. Let's see, let's you and I talk to the sisters after this. We'll be back right after this break. Hi, welcome back to Midday. We're live right now. Our special guest, Letty Cottin Pogrebin, and we're going to face our panel in a second. If we don't turn in the right direction, we're going to bump knees, right?
Knee lock.
Knee lock, that's right. I said, where do we begin? Well, I think our panel of sisters has some reactions to some of the things we were talking about. So here we go.
Okay, bye.
Hi. Now, just kick it off anywhere is something I had the feeling you wanted to make a point.
Well, I have a comment, and I relate very strongly to what you said, Letty, about trying to help our children change their roles or give them encouragement in going in different directions. I have a daughter who's 13 and a son who is 9, and my son is very interested in things that are not necessarily, quote, male things. He loves to dance and he loves to sing, and it's very hard.
Now, wait a second. I love to dance and I love to sing.
Well, she said not necessarily.
No.
She means not stereotypically.
Right,
he would prefer to take ballet class than play on the soccer team, for instance. I mean it in the truest sense, and it's a difficult issue in my family because my husband, although he is an encouraging person by nature, has difficulty with the fact that my son would prefer to do that than go out and be on the softball or the soccer team. And so I find it a difficult situation that I relate to in what you're saying, that I'm trying to give him that sensitivity and make him feel that it's okay to do that, he still plays tennis and swims, and my daughter does all the things that are truly very feminine in addition to playing tennis and doing a few more things that are, quote, male. My husband doesn't have the problem with her, but yet he does with my son, and I want very much to have it be a positive relationship between the two of them. Yeah. And for all of us. I think this is family politics.
Again, it has to start with the parents. When the parents sit down and say, what hang-ups are we bringing to parenting? What of our own unresolved scenarios and sort of silent problems do we bring to a set of expectations? Your husband should understand that what his son becomes does not reflect on him. It is a realization of who his son is. And if he interrupts it, if he interferes with it, if he doesn't underwrite full development of your son, someday he will feel very sorry because your son will be denying something true to himself and not becoming what his full potential is capable of.
Letty, how do you encourage, seeing yourself in your vast life experiences as a teacher, how do you encourage your children to have interest without taking them just that one step over the line that is really imposing your ego and your expectations on them?
Well, you know, my previous book was called Growing Up Free, and it was 648 pages of the answer to this question about not raising children with sex role prisons. And the one exercise that everyone seems to really relate to very well is stand in the doorway of your child's room. Suppose you have a 7-year-old girl. Could you move a 7-year-old boy into that room without changing a thing? If you couldn't, it's because you have already weighted the dice. Now, a 7-year-old girl cannot go out and buy things that she wants. Somewhere along the way, from when she was 1 and 6 months old and 18 months old, people bought her things they thought she should like to play with. By the time she's 7, she has, if she's in the average household, 38 dolls.
Really?
She may not have a single truck, but she has 38 dolls. That's a study that was done at the University of North Carolina. Now, you have parents who, even with a 4-year-old room, where the child has absolutely no idea what the marketplace, as a consumer, what the marketplace offers. And that room will have an absolute imbalance of toys because the parents bring to child rearing their own sense of what a child should do. So the way to avoid it is to simply provide what you would have to put in that room to make a 7-year-old boy feel comfortable, but provide it for the girl. Give both boys and girls a full selection so they can choose. Then you'll find out what they really like to do and be.
Just one quick follow-up. What about the mother and or the father who are afraid that their son and or daughter are going to turn out gay as a result of encouragement wearing trucks and boots or footballs and ballet class?
Well, I would really suggest that anybody who still believes in that goes down to Christopher Street and takes a look at what gay men look like. They're pretty indistinguishable, if they choose to be, from anyone else, unless they choose to label themselves through a whole set of symbolic efforts. They're indistinguishable. In other words, what you do and what you look like has nothing to do with your sexual orientation. And there are very powerful ballet dancers with lots of children. We know Jacques D'Amboise is a great example. Poor thing is cited every 5 minutes to reassure parents.
They wake him up in the middle of the night.
To reassure parents, you know, here's one, it's okay. And certainly there are women like poor Chrissy Everett who has to wear bows in order to reassure parents that you can be an athletic woman and still be, quote, feminine.
It's covered a lot of territory. That was a terrific open question. Yes?
I wanted to talk about favoritism. I have 2 nieces. One is 6 and one is 4. And when I visit them, I have to hold them both the same amount of time in my lap, give them both the same presents for their birthdays and Christmas. When I cut up some pizza pie, they have to be the same size. And I'm constantly aware of this. And I don't know what to do.
Who said you have to be that way? The parents?
Well,
or your own sense?
That's my own sense, because I'm trying to make up, I think, a little bit too for the times in the past with my sisters when maybe I showed favoritism to one or the other. But it's a constant struggle.
May I say that when parents are overly self-conscious about egalitarian treatment of their children, the children know that it's pro forma. I think children are responsive to the truth of your warmth toward them, your giving toward them. It all evens out in the end. But and certainly we as parents of twins had to deal with this in a very head-on way. Girl twins, identical twins. And our decision was, and certainly when they were old enough to be talked to, we made it very clear to them, we're not always going to be even-handed. Because we're going to relate to you as though you maybe we're 8 years apart sometimes and, you know, 1 minute apart other times. That has nothing to do with who you are. We're going to relate to you according to what you need at any given moment. And it's not always going to feel even, but I guarantee you when you're 21, you're going to feel as though you both got a fair shake. They're 19, we have 2 more years.
You know, that's such an important issue, what you raised about the parents' expectations. What I see so many women having to struggle with, they internalize this struggle of they've tried so hard to please the parent who wanted them to be the boy. So they became like the boy child. And when I ask women in the seminars what their roles were, there's always one who says, I was the boy. And that she had to be that. She felt she had to be that in order to get the love of her father, or in order to get the attention that her other sisters, she perceived, took away from her. And so many of the women in adulthood have to work through the expectations of the child they were supposed to be.
Exactly. The female is in many cases the original unwanted child.
Yes. Yes.
Is there a reverse to that? The situation where there are 3 boys in one family and one boy feels that he has to be the daughter for his mother, or is it?
I wouldn't want to speak in psychoanalytic terms, but I'm sure it's possible if there was a mother who was very invested in having somebody to fuss over, you know, that sense of bringing the baggage of stereotypes with you.
Yeah.
For a lot of people is extremely heavy and omnipresent. And for a mother who has like a very curly-headed little beautiful boy, there may be, in pathological situations, that tendency. I wouldn't want anybody to worry about it who was simply, you know, responding to the fact that they love their little boy a lot. That doesn't mean you're making him into a little girl.
We have someone on the line with a call. This is Bill Boggs on Midday. Hello.
Hi, my name is Diane, and I'm the youngest of 4 girls. And my father always really wanted a boy, okay? So when I came along, being that I was the youngest, he sort of like made me into the boy. I was the tomboy all the time. Now that we're older, and you know, I got the trucks for Christmas, and I got a set of race cars and stuff like that. I didn't get dolls, and because I could use my sister's dolls. But now that we're older, all of my sisters are married and have children. He's now looking at 4 granddaughters also, and still no boys. And I'm not married, I don't have any children, and I'm not doing typical feminine type things. And when my sisters go to him with their home problems, he's all excited and all thrilled. When I went to my father and said I want to be a police officer, he was like completely turned me off. And I really resented that because I'm not doing typical feminine type things, and he feels that now that I'm older, I should be married, I should have children.
So he's turned the tables on you.
It's a real no-win situation, once again, because your father needed a son when he had little kids, and now he needs a daughter to give him grandchildren
and give him a son.
To persuade him that you turned out, quote, normal. I think just move on with your life. You'll end up being very proud when you make sergeant.
You know, that's true. That's a good point. And on a more basic level, it really comes back to the point of you can't be having children to satisfy these needs.
That's the bottom line.
That is the bottom line.
It's the bottom line, whether you talk about sex roles, whether you talk about a sense of never having had enough self-esteem or never being the articulate one. You tried to have your children live out what you were unable to realize yourself. And that's not a good way to begin. Good.
We'll be back right after this. Okay, we just have 3 minutes here, and I wish we had another hour or 2 this afternoon. I really like everything that's coming out of today's program, but I'd like to talk with some of our guests on the panel, the sisters, and maybe Letty. Did you have any brothers, Letty?
I had none.
You had no brother. How many of you had brothers? Just raise your hands. Just talk to us a little bit about your perceptions of the way your parents raised your brothers that was different than the way they raised you.
Right. My brother Bobby was always special when I was small. I thought so anyway.
Where did he come along in the line?
Is the 3rd.
You were number 1.
I'm number 1.
You were number 2. What did you think about your brother Bobby?
She said he was favorite. I don't remember him being a favorite. We were good buddies. Yeah, he was like a big brother. Yeah, because Thurla was mean.
But he was younger than you.
She was what with you?
Mean.
Mean to you. Yeah.
Well, I was bossy, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's a basic sibling thing. Sometimes I think that the firstborn is not that happy to see the next one come chugging right in there, you know?
No, but you said he was like a big brother, but he was younger than you.
Yeah, but he was younger.
See, but because maleness carries automatic authority, so the firstborn boy is going to feel like a big brother no matter how old he is, in funny ways.
What about the brothers over in your household?
I'm trying to think of the ways in which we might have been raised differently. I think there's, more importantly than male-female in my family, were the 3 oldest and the 3 youngest.
What were the actual age differences?
Well, there's a 10-year span from the youngest.
6 over 10 years?
6 over every couple of years, every 2 years. So I'd come home from school and there'd be a bassinet. Every spring or fall there was a beautiful bassinet. Sometimes it was yellow, you know, the color. But, well, why don't you say some more about the brothers and then I'll...
Well, just basically how the main difference that I perceived was not in what I could do in terms of a sex role stereotype, but I did notice, or feel at any rate, that they were given a bit more freedom, that they were allowed to go a little bit further down the block or whatever it was, or given the money when we went to the store. Things like that that are a little more subliminal.
We're going to keep talking, but I want to be able to show you these books. This is called the Over-the-Shoulder Book Shot here. Here we got 2 books that can, I think you'll enjoy reading and can help your insights into family immensely. First, we have Letty Cottin Pogrebin's book, Family Politics. Letty also wrote Growing Up Free, which she mentioned, which is really a worthwhile book to read. And then we have Dr. Gail Atkins' book, Sisters. All right. I want to thank all you sisters for being with us today.